And I just wanted to say we just because we're presenting bills doesn't mean that we're endorsing them. And that's like different. We have like five representatives on here, and that doesn't mean that they're endorsing each other's bills, etc. So we don't know the details. We're just excited that housing remains the top issue. Um, I believe there are also some reporters that were invited. I don't know if they joined or not, but so this is a public meeting, treated as such. We're going to record it and post it to YouTube. And I think with that, so our agenda will be, um, we're going to have Matt Frommer and Eleni from the governor's office talk about the where we've come so far. So last year's bills, 2024 housing bill implementation, how that's going to work, how that's working. And then we're going to talk about the 2025 bills that we're expecting. And then we're going to talk about we'll have questions and dialogue. And then we will talk about what we can all do to help make housing affordable. So, Matt, do you want to take it away? And I think you're going to share your screen. Are you able to do that? All right, I'm going to mute. Take it away, Matt. Matt, I cannot hear you. Are you talking?
Matt, you're muted.
Okay, my bad. Can you hear me now? Too many
Yeah.
buttons to press. Can everyone see a slide? Okay. Um, Good evening, everyone. Thanks for spending your Thursday night with us. Talk about housing. That's awesome. My name is Matt Fromer. I work for a nonprofit called the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, or SWEEP. I work on transportation and land use policy. Did a lot of work on the land use bills these past couple years at the legislature, and a good amount of work at the local level as well. So I'm going to do a little update on the 2024 land use bill implementation, where we're at, and then I'll hand it over to some of our legislators and we can talk about the 2025 housing bills that are coming up. There were a lot of housing bills that passed in 2024. I'm going to really just focus on these five, but there are definitely others if you're interested in things like right of first refusal for affordable housing. Happy to talk about that. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to talk about the TOC bill, ADUs, parking requirements, occupancy restrictions, and housing planning. So starting with TOCs, what does this bill do? This is House Bill 1313. And this bill requires 31 cities and counties along the Front Range, and that's primarily in the Denver metro area, plus Colorado Springs and Fort Collins, to allow a certain amount of multifamily residential zoning capacity, also known as a housing opportunity goal, near their frequent rail stations and bus corridors. And then in those transit centers, those communities also need to streamline the approval process for housing projects, adopt at least three affordable housing strategies, and complete a displacement risk assessment. The bill also has some funding attached to it, so $35 million for a new TOC infrastructure grant program to help unlock these housing development opportunities. And then in a separate bill, we had $30 million in affordable housing tax credits with a focus on these transit centers. And the real goal here is to convert station areas like we're seeing on the left here that are vacant or underutilized to the image on the right, where we have housing next to transit, which of course is good for affordability. Multifamily housing, on average, is much less expensive than single-family detached units. It's also really good for transportation efficiency, for transit ridership, for walkability, climate, air quality, and so on. So this is a look at the TOC maps that the state, and that's the Department of Local Affairs, published back in September. So this applies to land within a half mile of rail stations and a quarter mile of frequent bus corridors that get 15-minute service or better. So that's the purple areas here in the Denver metro, and then Colorado Springs, Boulder County, and Fort Collins. And there's a kind of a complicated formula in the bill, but basically you take this acreage, subtract exempt parcels where housing really doesn't make sense. So like heavy industrial land, floodplain, cemetery, etc. And then multiply that acreage by 40 units per acre, and that gives you the zoning capacity target, total number of potential homes that can be developed in that area. And then the bill gives local governments a lot of flexibility as to where to put that zoning capacity. So they can leave certain neighborhoods alone and focus it in just a few areas, or you can kind of spread the peanut butter throughout around your frequent transit corridors. Okay, so where are we in the implementation process? So the bill passed last May. In September, DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, published the transit area and walkshed maps. And all of this information is on a website called Engage DOLA. I highly recommend checking it out. A lot of great resources and also the process for public and stakeholder engagement if you're interested. Coming up here in February, the state's going to be finalizing the calculation model and the guidance to help cities calculate that housing opportunity goal. And then a big date's coming up in June, on June 30th. That's when we're really going to learn more about where cities and counties are at with respect to the TOC bill requirements. They're going to submit a preliminary assessment. We've also got DOLA publishing the affordability menus from which communities need to pick those three strategies and the displacement risk materials. In terms of the compliance deadline, that's going to become at the end of 2026. So that's when these jurisdictions need to update their local zoning codes to comply with the bill. And then really by the end of 2027, if they haven't achieved a compliance status with DOLA, they will be deemed out of compliance with the bill. On the right, I just wanted to give people a sense to help like visualize density. Here's a look at some of the housing types and buildings we might expect this bill to result in around our transit stations. Okay, the second bill I want to talk about is House Bill 1152, accessory dwelling units or ADUs. I think most people are familiar with ADUs. What does this bill do? It requires cities and counties and MPOs, that's metropolitan planning organizations, basically our urban areas, to legalize ADUs and adopt minimum design standards to increase production. It's also got a $13 million grant program created, I think at DOLA, to help encourage affordable ADUs and encourage communities outside those urban areas to opt in by legalizing ADUs and complying with the requirements. So it does set some design standards for cities to meet. For example, cities cannot require an off-street parking space for an ADU unless there's no driveway, garage, or on-street parking. I'll let you read the list here, but similar requirements around square footage, setbacks, other design standards, basically matching the existing single-family home requirements on the same property. Where are we in the implementation
Hey
process?
Matt. Hey Matt, can I just add one other quick thing just on the last slide? I think one of the things that I think was really important in the development of this bill, and I think just that we heard from a lot of different members in the community and just I think writ large of how to actually make sure that the policy reform could be paired with the financing was really, I think, kind of what Matt hinted at in terms of the financing in the bill. The bill also created a program that CHAFA has underway as it relates to ADU financing for homeowners, so we can make it more accessible. I think one of the things that we've seen in other states and jurisdictions that have done this successfully is really trying to encourage more lenders to come to this space. When it comes to ADU financing for construction and other suites of products. So I just wanted to say that, CHAFA has been a really wonderful partner to work with on thinking through this. I think we learned a lot of really great lessons with the West Denver pilot project with Renee Martinez Stone and Huntington Bank. So I just wanted to call attention to policy reform in this space is really great, but then also I think that financing piece is really great to encourage different behavior and different innovative financing options that I think pair nicely with the reform. So just wanted to at least add that color too.
Yeah. Thanks, Eleni. So where are we in the implementation process? We launched the program last summer, and then the law takes effect June 30th, 2025. So about 6 months from now, the subject jurisdictions must update their local codes to comply with the bill. On the right, there's just an image of different ADUs in Boulder. You might be asking where are the ADUs, and I think that's kind of the point, is they blend in really well with existing single family or middle housing type neighborhoods. We've already seen some action on this, so I just want to pull a few headlines. So back in December, Denver updated its codes to comply with the ADU bill. Colorado Springs did in November. And then Centennial, this was back in May of 2024, so right around the time the bill passed, they legalized ADUs. However, they still require things like off-street parking and limit the height of ADUs. It's, I think, like 17 feet, so shorter than a single-family home. So that's an example of a community that would have to update their local codes to comply with the requirements in the bill. Okay, the third bill I want to talk about is really exciting. This is House Bill 1304 related to minimum parking requirements. I think we have Rep. Vigil on the call. If you want to talk about this one, I'd be happy to hand it over. Totally up to you.
Hi, yeah, I'm here if that's okay. Thanks for making a little space for me for this, and my apologies to Matthew. I'd been kind of back and forth about having multiple things going on this evening. To be perfectly honest, a lot of the policy chops for this came from Matt and from Sweep and just all of our all of our policy development partners in that space. So I am probably not the greatest expert in the world, but I will tell you, hi, Rep. I will tell you, I got really, really obsessed and geeked out with parking in the year or so before we ran this bill. And it just kind of became my little baby and ultimately my favorite, best bill that I ran in my first term. So I think where we're at on this currently, I have looked a little over the advisory document that was put together that the bill ordered, and I'm really excited to see what came together with that. For those who didn't keep up with this bill a ton, basically we really wanted to just scrap parking mandates across the board in all of the MPOs. But it was not necessarily feasible to do that. That was just kind of our top level. That's what we would have preferred to do. And ended up landing with this, sort of within a quarter mile of all of the frequent transit stops. So tracks with the TOC bill. And then this document that was put together by DOLA and the Energy Office, and who else am I missing? And obviously by CDOT. Um, really put together a lot of good resources, I think, for developers, for local governments. And one of my favorite things that I've been seeing happen since we passed this bill is that multiple jurisdictions looked at all of the complexity, which was something that happened in the Senate, basically whittled the bill down to a spot that was just a little less intrusive for all of our sticky senators over there. And a whole bunch of jurisdictions have looked at all of those negotiations and said, we'll just go ahead and remove all parking mandates for all uses across our entire jurisdiction, which is what we wanted in the first place. And I think it's what's going to make a lot more sense for a lot more of our local govs. So that document is out. The maps are out, and I think, what is it, June 3rd? I'm having to check the slide to remember. June 30th this year is when the law will take effect, and we'll start to see reporting from local governments that they're in compliance, I think at the end of the year, or the end of next year. So I'm really excited that it seems to be working out, and I'm really grateful to everyone, my legislative members who are on this call, and to Matt and Eleni and everybody who was so helpful with this bill. It's exciting to see it happening. And I think we're first in the nation to go to this degree. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Rep. VL. Yeah, so these are the maps for the parking bill, also available on the Engage DOLA website, published back in September. So it applies to a few more communities in the TOC bill because it's within a quarter mile of bus and rail stops served by a 30-minute service, not just 15, 30-minute service. And we do have some of that in Pueblo and Loveland and Greeley. So those communities are included in this one as well. Here's an analysis that the Colorado Energy Office did to look at the impact of parking reform on basically financially feasible housing development opportunities. And really, without even changing zoning, it unlocks um, a lot of financially feasible housing development. So it's an 80% increase above the baseline, 110% increase in infill areas, and then 180% increase in potential housing in those transit areas. So this parking bill combined with the TOC bill is where we expect to see a lot of new housing production near transit. And like Rep. Vigil said, this bill takes effect June 30th, 2025, so about 6 months from now. Communities, the subject jurisdictions are no longer able to enforce minimum parking requirements for multifamily housing near transit. I do want to shout out this new report that came out from DOLA, the best practices in parking management strategies for Colorado cities. So this is like all the additional strategies to better manage parking. So things like paid parking, shared parking. We have just have a lot of empty spaces in our communities. I think there's like 7 or 8 parking spaces for every 1 car in the US. So how do we manage the existing parking better than we are now? And this guide is really helpful in that. And then, like Rep. Veal said, Longmont, I think a week after the legislative session ended, did away with parking requirements for all uses citywide. More recently, in December, Denver released a proposal to get rid of minimum parking requirements for all uses citywide. So again, going above the requirements of the bill, and similarly in Boulder. The fourth bill, House Bill 1007, prohibits residential occupancy limits. So idea here being that prior to this bill, a lot of cities would limit how many unrelated roommates could live together, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, regardless of the size of the house. And that led to a really well-named advocacy group out of Boulder called Bedrooms Are for People. Yes, we should fill the bedrooms we already have. So what this bill does is prevents local governments from limiting residential occupancy based on familiar relationships. They can still limit residential occupancy based on health and safety standards, and the IBC, fire code, and other resources have guidance on that. And that law took effect back in July of 2024. And then the last bill is Senate Bill 174, which we refer to as the Housing Planning Bill. Well, it's technically called the Sustainable Affordable Housing Assistance. But what this bill does is really is require local governments to complete a housing needs assessment so that they can quantify how much housing they need at different income levels, different household sizes, to close the gap in the current shortage, and then also accommodate projected growth, both on the housing side and then based on the job growth projections from the state demographer. It's also got some interesting stuff around strategic growth or growth management, so that we're really prioritizing housing and development within our urban areas rather than greenfield development and exurban sprawl. And so that those plans will come out, or a state plan will come out at the end of 2025. And then right after this bill is passed, DRCOG, which is the Denver Regional Council of Governments, released their regional housing needs assessment. And I highly encourage you to look at it. I mean, there's just a few screenshots. It would take a whole another hour to present on it. But basically what they found is the Denver Metro is currently 52,000 units short of a stable housing market. And if you look at the next 10 years, we need to build that housing plus about 164,000 units, totaling 216,000 units just in the Denver metro area. And they've got some great data here on sort of historic new homes. You can see over the last 20 years in the bottom left there by housing type. They've got housing need by income in the top right there, by a sort of AMI bucket there. And then you can see permitting trends. And I just pulled like 4 similarly sized communities in the bottom right: Arvada, Centennial, Lakewood, and Westminster. And you can see how much housing they're permitting each year based on type. There are a lot of dates in that bill, so I'm not going to read all of these. But DOLA has just published some guidance on the housing needs assessments for local governments to use. It gives cities an option to do it themselves or to participate in a regional process like Dr. Cog is leading here. They've also got a displacement risk assessment guide that's on the website, and some good reading if you're interested in displacement mitigation. And then looking ahead, I just highlighted a few of the sort of big dates here. By the end of 2026, local governments need to have a housing needs assessment or have participated in a regional HNA process and submitted that to DOLA. And then all that needs to translate to a housing action plan that's due by January 1st, 2028. Like I said, all this is on the Engage DOLA website, and I put the link there at the top. Highly encourage you to check it out. The state departments they've got this like interagency group that's developing these materials, publishing drafts, getting feedback. So there's a public engagement opportunity calendar on there if you're interested in participating. So it's all online for review. Okay, that's all I've got. And I'll hand it back to Matthew.
Wait, really quick, I also just, in addition to Representative Vigil, I also just wanted to call attention. I know that Matthew, you mentioned it, but Representative Woodrow is also on this call, who is obviously a sponsor of the TOC bill, huge champion. Also was the sponsor of SB 213, which I think gave birth to like all of the different bills. And I think without the failure of 213, which was not a failure, it was really a success, I think actually bared way more policy fruit last session than I think. But so I just wanted to at least call attention to it. I know many of you supported the efforts of 213 and at least concepts in there, but also just wanted to call attention to Representative Woodrow. And obviously Representative Boesenecker has obviously been very supportive of all the land use efforts too. So just wanted to say that.
Amen. If you haven't been told you are going to destroy a neighborhood, then you're probably not an elected official that's run a housing bill. And speaking of amens, we're going to let the distinguished housing champion, Representative Andy Boesenecker, now talk about YIGBY, which, if you don't know what YIMBY is, then YIGBY is like one step further down the housing advocacy path. Yes, in God's backyard. Something about churches. Rep. Boesenecker, you want to take it away?
Well, thanks, Matthew, and good to see so many familiar faces on the call. And let me just start by saying thanks to YIMBY for Collins and so many other partners for making this conversation possible. Housing conversations can be tense. They can be a lot of things. They're very important because I think it matters to all of us. And it's really important, I think, to myself and my colleagues just to know that so many thoughtful folks are working on policy in this space, and to be able to lean on you all is a real privilege as we work to crack this nut on behalf of the state of Colorado. So really appreciate the opportunity here. YIGBY is a bill that I'm incredibly excited about. It does indeed stand for Yes in God's Backyard, although the bill is more broad than applying to religious organizations or faith-based institutions. YIGBY seeks to grant an administrative review process to faith-based institutions, public schools, and public universities that wish to dedicate a portion or some of their land for the purpose of housing. So inside of that bucket, it would subject a housing proposal to administrative review process, very similar to the process that is outlined in 1313, the Transit-Oriented Communities Bill, and some of the same language from the ADU bill from last year as well. I would say that overall, we view this as right-sizing the development review process for projects that I think in large part align the mission of an organization with a stated need in the community. By way of background and context, I come to this conversation having been Lutheran clergy myself. I served in parish settings and also as a mission developer. I've worked on capital campaigns in those settings. And I've also been a K-5 music teacher and understood the difficulty in being able to find housing in my community where I was hoping to teach. And those things are really true for a lot of of folks across our. The bill is simple. We seek to use underdeveloped or underutilized land where organizations wish to opt into a program for the express purpose of housing. And that's really important to mention that the program and the opportunities are completely optional. If a congregation wants to explore these opportunities, they would be more than welcome to do so. If it's not the right time or the right conversation for a congregation, then we certainly encourage their ongoing good work in our communities. Same things for our public schools and public universities. The bill is statewide at present, meaning that public schools, public universities, and faith-based institutions across the state would benefit from that administrative review process. And we're really working on some things that I think underscore the importance of that statewide decision. And that includes housing that we're aware of in Eagle County that school districts are actively working on. And knowing that for our school districts, it's not just about workforce housing, it's also about housing families and students day in and day out. The bill that you might have seen a draft of, it'll be introduced next week. The 24th is, I believe, the deadline for that. We've been having really good conversations, I think, with our local government friends. I want to thank CML, CCI, CCAT for their deep engagement on the bill. We're making another round of stakeholder calls with those organizations next week to be able to go over some of the changes we anticipate for the introduced version. Obviously, top of everyone's mind is affordability and density, and I think we've made some good progress there to be able to dial in the type of housing that communities are really looking for, as well as making sure that we're able to give flexibility to congregations to build the type of housing that they would like to build. The bill includes several pieces that you'll perhaps recognize as familiar from the TOC bill from last year. Exemptions for certain parcels. There's a lot of good reasons why a piece of land might not be suitable for housing if it encourages urban sprawl, if it is served by well water and septic, for example. These are all really good reasons why perhaps housing is not a suitable use for a piece of land. But we know that congregations are often well positioned and situated inside of existing transit areas. They're surrounded in neighborhoods and really are an opportunity to be able to utilize a portion of their land for housing for folks. Just a couple other things. I think it's really important to mention that this bill and any housing built under this bill would have to comply with existing federal law. So ADA, for example, Fair Housing Act, all of those things ring true here. We want to make sure that housing is for everybody, and I believe that's a shared value on folks in this call. And then last but not least, the bill includes a 5-year look back period to say that a congregation needs to have owned that land for 5 years at the point of enactment to make sure that we're not encouraging real estate speculation in this space, but rather marrying the mission of a congregation with a stated need in the community. And so, Matthew, I'll stop there. I'll just say I'm really excited about this policy. My thanks to John and Eleni from the Govs team for really helping so much in dialing in this policy and aligning it with the existing, I think, initiatives in this space. I understand YIMBY to be yet another lane on the highway that hopefully gets us to the place of housing, or maybe even you can imagine it being front range passenger rail if you live up by me. A great way to get where we're going in a way that hopefully helps folks find housing that's accessible. So I really appreciate the call.
Thank you, Andy. And again, we'll save questions for after, or if you want to put them in the chat, we can just try and answer them. I'm most excited for the scripture references and the floor speeches that are going to come with this. So, yeah, like do your reading, Reverend Pastor. Okay, now we'll have
I appreciate it.
Representative Woodrow, and I think we have seen Smart Stare. The governor's calling it Smart Stare, and also I think you're a co-sponsor on no coordination between landlords in setting rents. So you could talk about either one or both. If you want to come off your mute and turn it to you, Representative Woodrow.
Thanks, Matthew. It's so nice to see everyone. Aren't we cool, folks, on a Thursday night? Thank you, everyone, for your advocacy and what you've been doing for years. YIMBY, sweep, starting with SB 213, and then last year with all the bills that we were able to pass, as the culmination of this effort. Huge shout out, Eleni. Thank you to you and the governor's team for being such strong advocates in this space and partners to work with. So building upon the success of the past several years, this year I'm really excited to be running 2 housing bills. Real quick, one is something that I was sponsored last year with Rep. Mabry, and we got out of the House, and a version passed the Senate. It's a bill banning the use of rent fixing algorithms by residential landlords. Of course, landlords should be competing with each other on key terms like price, and instead what they've been doing is hiring these very sophisticated third-party software programs called RealPage and Yardi. And through those software algorithms, they're able to essentially suppress supply, flatten out vacancy rates, enforce price discipline, and operate a cartel. So really excited to bring that bill back this session. It's a House Priority Bill. It's Bill 1004. So Rep. Mabry and I are excited to present it in House Business before the end of the month, and get it off to the Senate. And we're really excited about that one this year. The bill that I'm actually here to talk about is Smart Stair. What? Yeah, it's been rebranded from Single Stair. Now we're calling it Smart Stair. Last year, there was an effort to do this. So huge shout out, he's not here, but Representative Valdez for sort of blazing the trail on this. Really cool policy regarding single stair building design. We have single stair in cities like New York and Seattle, and of course, much of Europe. These designs allow for more affordable family style units to be built in a denser, smarter, more efficient way. We've been working with developers, building designers, architects. The whole community is so excited at the prospect of bringing this type of product to Coloradans. We have, of course, as everyone on the call knows, an affordability crisis. Getting units that can actually fit families in metropolitan areas is huge, as opposed to just single pellets, detached single family dwellings. So this is a really exciting policy. This year, working with Rep. Boesenecker, we've already begun very robust stakeholding, meeting with everyone, housing advocates, disability advocates, like I said, everyone in the housing community, getting everyone on board in order to really have a process that makes people feel listened to. And we've been leaning into those conversations. Last year, some of you might remember that we got significant pushback from the fire chiefs. We've already reached out to them and had several conversations. They've been very positive. Don't want to represent by any means that they support the bill right now, but they do recognize that we have a housing crisis, an affordability crisis, and they're very committed to that. And at the same time, I think we'd all agree on the call that we're all very committed to safety. And that's really been the pushback is you need this second stairwell for safety reasons. And this year, thanks to the governor's team and Pew and other resources, we have a lot of data to show that this design is safe. And so we're really pressing that point this time around because safety is top of mind for everyone. We want these units to come on and we want them to be built and constructed in a way that's safe. We have extra safety features, including sprinkler systems, et cetera. So, safety is sort of top of mind. So wanted to work in Colorado. The question is where, as Rep. Boesenecker likes to emphasize, we need to right size the policy. It's very important through our conversations and stakeholding that we make sure that we get a law, ultimately in the end that makes sense for all jurisdictions. So what might work in Denver and Fort Collins and Colorado Springs and other municipalities might not work in smaller parts of, smaller towns, unincorporated parts of the state. We might get there one day, but right now we might need to really think hard about the geographic scope and reach of the bill, like we've done with the other policies in housing the past several years. Last thing I'll mention is we have an implementation date in December of 2027. We give, sort of a pretty decent on-ramp for folks to comply. This is done with in mind the idea that I believe the international code is being updated to account for single stair. There was a subcommittee vote. It was something like 13-1 in favor of single stair. So we do feel like it's going to be coming when the new code is updated. And that presents an opportunity for us to be leaders in this space. So very excited at the prospect of being able to do this. Eleni, did I miss anything? And Rep. Boesenecker's still on the call graciously, so he can tell me what I missed.
I was just going to say, I think we're happy to also, there's been some really great research done at the national level too. So if folks want to learn more too about kind of the context, I think Rep. Woodrow pointed out the contours of the policy and its benefits really well. But thinking about legislating stairs seems very wonky, but the benefits and the outcomes of the policy can be really meaningful. So Pew Charitable Trust and some other think tanks have done really, really good analysis on this policy. So happy to send what we have in case folks are interested in nerding out even more and reading through that.
I have seen Rep. Boesenecker and Rep. Woodrow do stakeholder meetings, and they're both really good. And these issues, we are like all rah rah, let's just do it. But they are very serious and they contemplate all the possibilities and they meet with all the right people. And I'm hopeful for some of these bills to get through. Is Senator Bridges with us yet? He was going to jump on. He had like a prior commitment. But so if he's on, share your screen or unmute. Just do it. Anybody know? Does anybody see him? Okay, so we'll still wait for Senator Bridges. We were going to talk about condo defect, construction defect liability, and I believe there's Jason Hopfer is on the call. I actually haven't met Jason, but I was referred. He was somebody sent me his contact info as being an expert on the topic, and we haven't seen bill drafts yet. But Jason, can you tell us about building condos and construction defect liability? It's like sounds like the worst topic ever, but it's important.
I might agree with you that it might be the worst topic ever. Jason Hopfer, I represent the Colorado Association of Realtors at the state capitol, among other folks. So yes, that makes me a contract lobbyist. I guess I'll start. I don't know that I call myself an expert, but I've managed to immerse myself in the topic several times over the last several years, and was drafted by Representative Byrd to help her this year try to rethink what we might do on construction defects and trying to increase housing stock, particularly in some of the areas where we desperately need new construction. I think one of the issues that we've seen in the past has been, and I think rightfully so for the trial bar, the efforts from others on construction defects has been pointed at all types of housing, has a variety of different impacts that are beyond just the multifamily condo aspects. So one of the things we started looking at was, well, can we look at how we might try to ensure that there is quality builds in a middle market housing scenario that would find ways to lower the risk and severity of litigation while allowing homeowners to get redress for building defects. And so, where I described previous efforts as being thou shalt not in a variety of ways, what we're trying to do is not tell people you can't recover for losses, but to make sure that the right people are being sued for those claims, particularly in the multifamily space. So, we're looking at legislation that we're still working on drafts on that would focus in on that middle market. And by middle market, I mean housing being built in the multifamily context that's at the median home price in the county or below, as determined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So that will vary depending on the county. So, obviously in a mountain county, it's going to be a higher median price than it would be in some other counties in the Eastern Plains, for example. It will then go into how you might have a rebuttable presumption that you don't have a defect if you've gotten your permits, and then allow for the presumption to be rebutted by either actual damages being caused by the defect, contract violations, or violations of the common law. Really, the focus there is to make sure that, again, the right people are being sued for the defect, rather than adding claims that may not result in actual damages being addressed. Think of things like the nailing pattern is off on the roof, right? Or the studs are out a quarter of an inch. You're not going to go and tear down all those studs or redo all the roofing, but those are things that are commonly added to claims. We're then also looking at affirmative defenses that would address the issue of whether mitigation has occurred or whether there's been a natural disaster or something like that to address claims. And we've spent a lot of time trying to work with the insurance industry to try to get them back into the market in the multifamily space. One of the things that we see a lot of is a lot of particularly nonprofit builders have told us in the meetings we've had since about June that their primary reason for not building in the space is cost of the insurance policies that go along with multifamily units. So trying to come up with strategies that would encourage the insurance industry to, one, reduce costs or frankly come back into the market in that multi-unit space for individual insurance policy, liability policies, rather than wrap policies, which are driving a lot of costs for independent, for small builders. Those are the main highlights. We're still working on drafts, but I want to give you guys an idea of the direction that folks are going to. All of these things would be reliant on building, again, in that middle market approach rather than across the board. Sorry about the dogs.
Thank you. And it's interesting how these bills, and we could talk more, but they support one another. We get rid of the parking, the need to have a massive parking lot, and then you can maybe have a lot that you can build a single stair on, and maybe those single stair buildings will be condos that you can sell. It all works together. Okay, do we have Senator Bridges yet? Otherwise, the other housing bill that I had seen was related to improving infrastructure to reduce homelessness, and we couldn't get Representative Rutinel, who is a housing champion. I'm going to put it in the Slack. Eleni, do you want to talk? Do you know anything about this? It's about the Interagency Council on Homelessness and Housing Special Districts. Do you know anything about this one?
I do. That's a Representative Rutinel bill. I haven't been, candidly speaking, we're still reviewing that bill, but I'm more than happy to talk about the modular bill.
Oh, yeah.
And Representative Boesenecker, I don't know if he's still on, not to put him also on the spot too, but he is also the sponsor in the House, but I'm more than happy to give a very quick overview of what the bill is trying to accomplish, if that's helpful. And I think, Matthew, I had sent the fact sheet that you could send around to everyone too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm more than happy to kind of walk through.
I'll pull up the
yeah.
fact sheet and share it on the screen.
Okay, great. So I think one of the things, just to kind of context set, and Representative Boesenecker, is there anything that you want to say before I jump in? I just want to make sure.
No, you go for it, Eleni. Thanks so much. I appreciate
Yeah, of course. If you haven't guessed, Representative Boesenecker and I are in close communication about all things housing all day, if you will. So we're really excited about this one because we, a couple of years ago, we had, the influx of all of the ARPA dollars. And one of the things in particular that we were, really interested in and legislative partners and other partners in this space was how can we better, I think, facilitate the modular housing industry here in Colorado? And when I say that, I mean through a variety of different ways, through our state funding and through some policy reform. So back in 2022, we signed a law and worked on a bill that had a lot of different components. One in particular was establishing the Innovative Housing Incentive Program through the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, our economic development state agency. And what that bill, I think, sought to accomplish was creating more of a per unit incentive for modular housing units to be affordable, to be energy efficient. So one component of that bill was a per unit incentive. The other was a working capital grant program. And that was really to help foster the businesses and the companies here that are building modular housing and to really help support them in the working capital side. Then the third component of that was really focused on on trying to build up our capacity and our factory capacity by incentivizing and providing financing options through CHAFA, to really allow for more factories in all four corners of the state. Something that we found in a lot of the research that we did was that it wasn't really saving a lot of time and money by just bringing in different, components of these modular houses from out of state, Kansas, Nebraska, et cetera. So how can we grow the businesses that exist within the state, but also how can we ensure that we can build up more factory capacity? I say all of this to kind of just context set, because one of the most important things about that is really that interconnection of how housing is kind of related to so many different things. Not only with the modular housing industry, is trying to grow that industry for the good of more affordable housing and more opportunities for home ownership, but also I think the unique opportunity that modular housing has for our climate conditions to be able to build year round. So I think that is kind of the foundation in which we're really trying to build off of that program and some of the financing that we've done through Proposition 123. So what the bill that was introduced last week or 2 weeks ago is SB 002. And, some of the goals of that bill are really to try to remove or reduce regulatory barriers between state and local governments as it relates to modular housing. The state has a long history of regulating regulating parts of manufactured housing. But what we really are trying to accomplish in this bill is more coordination between state and local permitting of these offsite factory built homes. So that's kind of high level what the goal of the bill is. I think one of the things that we're also trying to explain, and we're in the process. Actually, Commissioner Pogue gave us this great suggestion to try to kind of create a flow chart of what does the state currently regulate and what do locals currently regulate as it relates to factory built housing. So I think that the bill has sparked a lot of really great, productive conversations. One of the pieces of the bill is to try to create what we've called kind of these regional climate codes through the technical advisory committee that already exists with DOLA. And when I say regional climate codes, what I really mean is really try to build towards these codes that can address these different climatic or geographic considerations in different parts of the state. But so these modular producers don't have to create a whole different type of product from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So how can we create better economies of scale with the end result of having more housing, right? Speeding up the timeline, reducing cost, and really trying to build the economies of scale. One example or story that I think is interesting. And again, it's different industry wise, but we were able to do so many great things with the development of industry U lines when it comes to automobile manufacturing to really allow for some of these manufacturers to build up a pipeline of product. Right now, we have such great companies in Colorado that really do want to build affordable housing. They want to provide housing in their communities, but not all of the time between the state regs and the local regs are these efficiencies, when I think one of the goals of modular housing is to create better efficiencies. So how can we, I think, help these modular producers have that pipeline with the certainty of more standardized codes? And I say that as in we recognize we can't have a one size fits all code, just given the different considerations throughout the state. So that's a big piece of the bill. And then I think some of the other pieces of feedback that we integrated within the bill, as some of you remember from SB 213, there was a provision in a very long bill, Rep. Woodrow remembers, that basically said that local governments cannot overregulate or basically discriminate against manufactured or modular housing more than they would stick built. And that's, again, trying to, I think, eliminate this stigmatization of modular housing or manufactured housing that still exists. So really, making sure that there isn't local exclusion of modular structures, especially where site-built structures are accepted. So that's another piece of the bill. And then one of the other things that we heard through feedback that is a part of the bill that we're still, getting feedback on as well, is trying to improve opportunities for individuals to get engaged as general contractors or subcontractors of modular developments, knowing that this is a niche area and trying to save more opportunities on the cost and the time for modular construction. So really trying to have more general contractors that are familiar with modular construction. So I say that that's kind of a 1,000-foot view of the bill. I'm not sure if Senator Bridges has joined, but Matthew can send out the fact sheet. But I think one of the beauties of this bill and what it's trying to accomplish, and again, there's I think a lot of area for collaboration with our local partners who have especially gone through these processes, is we see this as kind of a tool, another tool, to Representative Boesenecker's point, another tool on the, what was it, tool on the highway, car on the highway, whatever the I always mess up analogies because my parents are Greek and I can never do them right, but you get the point. It's another tool in the toolbox, but it's also a good workforce development opportunity here too, right? And it's also economic development as well. So it kind of ties in a whole host of different things into one. So I will leave it there. I think, you'll see the bill move forward throughout the process. And I know that we have a whole spreadsheet of feedback that we've been getting from local partners and industry partners. So, part of the beauty of the legislative process is even in your introduced version, it goes through changes for the better. So I will leave it there.
Thank you, Eleni. We know the housing crisis is solved when I can go to Costco and get one of these manufactured houses. That's when we can all just retire. Okay, I think that covers most, is a rapid fire on all the housing bills that we've heard about. There may be some others that are introduced, like, legislators can do that. But are there any questions for our representatives or state staffers? Let me go back in the chat. Any current discussions or bills in the pipeline to tackle insurance and wildfire resiliency costs? I think Governor Polis mentioned that in his speech, but I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, my colleague Casey and our Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Conway, have been working on two separate proposals around homeowner insurance as it relates to wildfire mitigation, especially hail and hail and fire and some other components. But those have not been introduced yet, and I'll make sure Matthew can kind of send out that once those are finalized. One is around hail-proof roofs and wildfire, and with our wildfire I can't remember we have an enterprise as it relates to catastrophic damage. And then the second bill that he also mentioned in the State of the State is around homeowners insurance transparency. So trying to shed more light on how these premiums and these risk assessments are actually modeled and calculated to give us a better sense of why premiums have skyrocketed so much, like what's actually going into this third-party modeling. So that's a transparency bill that's being run by Rep. Brown and Rep. Titone. That hasn't been introduced yet, but as soon as those are introduced, we'll make sure that Matthew has that information. Yeah, I'll make sure to send that out.
Yeah, and we have everybody's emails who registered. So if you got on the call because someone forwarded you a link and you didn't register, then we don't have your email. So we'll find you, or you'll find us. Taylor Wickland has their hand up. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. So I was at an event this past Sunday via Boulder County League of Women Voters, kind of meet and greet with some state legislators. And home rule kept coming up. So I'm just wondering, what is the talking point from the legislators on this call to kind of deal with that question, because it kind of comes up here in Longmont. Colorado Municipal League brings it up all the time. I think that was a problem because, if you look at the foundation home rule, a lot of these bills is about actually letting people do what they need to do in their home. So I just want to know what kind of talking points we can give to our counselors to support bills and our legislators. Thank you.
Rep. Boesenecker, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll offer my perspective and certainly appreciate the conversations that my colleagues have also had in this space. I just want to first start by saying that really do want to commend so many of our local governments for working so hard to solve this problem because they hear the challenges of housing each and every day. We have county commissioners on this call from diverse areas of our state, and it's no different there than it is my community. Housing is a deep-seated need, and I think a lot of our local governments are working really hard to try to fix these issues on behalf of their constituents. I also know that I represent a home rule municipality in Fort Collins, and we've had two versions of land use code update that have been overturned by what I would consider to be a relatively small percentage of citizen petitioners who have exercised their right to be able to do those things. But at the end of the day, what that meant for our community is some very positive steps forward in terms of housing were walked back. And what we see when that happens, even on the individual jurisdiction and even on the individual municipality level, is that it impacts housing prices and certainly housing availability for surrounding jurisdictions. None of this happens in a vacuum. And that's why I really feel compelled to offer at least my perspective that I think housing, and certainly affordable housing, is indeed a mix of statewide and local concern. And with the recognition that I think the state, in a lot of instances, my community in particular, can offer not only cover, but really important steps forward in order to implement changes that I think the majority of folks in my district would like to see. And that's more housing and more affordable housing. And I would also just recognize inside of that the incredible role that our local governments have in implementing that policy day in and day out. And I understand it to be a partnership, but one where the state has a vested interest to make sure that folks can attain housing in our communities.
Thank you, Rep. Boesenecker. Is there any legislation specific to preventing investors from purchasing single-family homes, as it's hard for first-time home buyers to compete with them? I'm not aware of any.
Not at the moment. I'll take
yeah.
this. Not at the moment, but there are people looking at this. Obviously, the corporate ownership of housing in general and the focus of certain firms on single-family detached housing has not only led to litigation, but a look at legislative solutions as well. It's not entirely clear what can be done constitutionally, or the extent and extension of our antitrust laws. But I can tell you it is something very much on our minds as we see consolidation and market concentration, and with it, higher prices.
There's a question about, are there any bills to require cities to provide revolving trust funds for affordable housing? Or maybe just like a question on the topic of how to get more money into affordable housing for our nonprofits.
There's actually, so obviously, as a lot of you know, we have a really tight budget year this year, but there's one bill that's I think it doesn't go to municipalities, but another bill in particular that I think is looking at an innovative public financing tool as it relates to mortgages, creating more products for home ownership mortgages, especially for low to moderate income. So that one I think is really exciting and is an innovative tool that I think is needed. The other one, it's not been introduced yet, but I think that there's potential for a bill. I don't want to speak on behalf of the sponsor here, so I'll just say that there's a bill that I've been chatting with some folks on of how to actually get more community investments leveraging some of our existing state funds and structures to get more money for home ownership and rental. But more to come on that. Still kind of developing it. And then there's another. We're never not working on housing at the state capitol, as you all can see. There's another one that we're also thinking about, again, going back to using existing and or creating innovative financing tools for more housing around transit, which I think really pairs well with a lot of Rep. Woodrow's work on the TOC bill. So I will leave it there, meaning that there's going to be potential for more ways to look at getting more investment into communities for housing. It's just a little bit more challenging knowing our tight budget year, but that doesn't mean that we can't get innovative.
Okay. So it's been an hour and people need to go to their normal lives. Eleni emailed me at 10:48 last night about this. And I was like, this is gonna be a long session, sister, if you're gonna be emailing people at this hour, this early. But since we organized it, I get to give the final speech. And just, first I want to thank all our dear elected officials. I know there's some at the local level too, but state level, for running these state bills. I've gone to some of these town halls, and man, the things people say in public are just crazy to me. So thank you for enduring the criticism. And so YIMBY, I'm a volunteer, right? I just want housing to be affordable for everybody. And so we have plenty of great ideas for policy. What we need more of is political will. We need to first show up at town halls. We need to show up at our city council meetings. We need to show up at affordable housing public hearings, at planning and zoning commissions. Because when we don't go, then there's just 100 people that say, we can't have this because of traffic, because of the character of the neighborhood. I need the parking lot. I park there, and then we miss the housing, and then we end up with this huge shortage. And also just helping implement the law. We've seen some city councils already start to say like, well, maybe we could just sue the state and we'll see. And if we can align the political will of the state and the cities together, then we won't have these expensive legal fights and cleanup bills and right. So we gotta fight NIMBYism at the local level. We need to help implement these state laws that do pass. Testifying. So this is how testifying works if you have never done it before. So you sign up. There's a website, and we'll send it out in a link. You show up, or you sign up for a committee hearing, and what happens is they'll say like it starts at 10 a.m., but it's flexible, right? So they may have extra long floor time, and then they need to have lunch, and so then the committee actually starts at 1 p.m. and you're just like a regular person with a normal job, and so you're trying to like call in over Zoom or try to figure out when to jump over to the Capitol. So I know so YIMBY Action is YIMBY Fort Collins and YIMBY Denver. That's like an official group. But if you're part of a pro-housing organization, advocacy organization, or maybe you are pro-housing, but you work for a city, and so you can't speak publicly, or you have like a board of directors that you need to approve everything. Reach out to us with your private account or send your friends or family to us, and we help coordinate those testimonies. Like we will have people listening in, and we'll hear, oh, it's about to start. That means that it's only 3.5 hours until you're going to be heard. And then we'll chat each other. We have a Slack channel and group chats, so we can help you be organized with that. And then we know that this work is not done. While we have many great bills, there's not a big missing middle bill. There's not lot splitting. There's not streamlined permitting, a shot clock. So there's a lot of bigger, probably messier, harder political fights that still need to happen and probably won't happen this year. And so we have all these little groups, Livable, Littleton, or Launched Longmont. Bedrooms Are for People, Boulder. So if we can stay coordinated as a group, so that when these big fights come and there's just one representative in one city that is not Fort Collins, is not wonderful Representative Andy Boesenecker, but we need to reach them, and maybe you're the only one that has a good relationship with them and that can explain condo insurance bill or whatever it may be. Let's get coordinated as a statewide coalition of advocates so that when the big political fights come, and it may be like a ballot measure even, that we can have a true grassroots coalition and fight for housing statewide and not just in our own little corners. So look for a follow-up email from us. And thank you for coming. I see some more things in the chat. Are there any other questions or any other final thoughts? I would give our dear Eleni the last word on what we should be doing.
No, I think you should have the last word. I just wanted to say thanks for even having me. And, I think one of the best parts about this job is getting to work with folks like you and obviously getting to work with folks in the legislature. It's awesome. And I think as we start to get some of these bills scheduled and introduced, of course, democracy at its finest is showing up for committee. And I think giving, your voice to some of these pieces of legislation, knowing that, there's always a contingency of people who are anti-growth or anti-housing and development. So I think just one of the most important things is showing up, telling your legislators that you care about these issues. One huge lesson that we, I think learned with 213 is that there's so many people that care about these issues, and now they're more educated and aware of how it is getting discussed at the state level. And so the best thing that you can do is show up, tell your legislators that you care about these issues. And I don't want to have the last word. That was just my thing. We'll make sure to get all of the information of when things get scheduled for committee, how to register, and all of that. And never hesitate to reach out to obviously the legislators on this call or myself or anyone. But Matthew, you should have the last word.
Okay, just everybody. I know you're all working on this in your own little spot in Colorado, and look forward to meeting more of you and talking with more of you. Please reach out, and we'll see you at the committee testimony table probably. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you. Go listen to that Spotify playlist. Hey, it's James Burtis. I can't believe you got on the call. Good job.